Good morning, guys, and welcome to the podcast. I have Maria Chapman for us today, and she is a entrepreneur, and she's going to talk to us all about ghostwriting and talking about for the audience. Let's write words that change the world. So I'm really happy to have her on, and she is the founder also of a nonprofit Journey to Success that provides business coaching and startup services to folks disabled in mid-career. So I'm really happy to have her on and discuss. So Maria, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, briefly introduce yourself and how you got started, and we'll dive right into the work that you're doing.
Sure. My name, again, is Maria Chapman. I own Connected Ghostwriting. We are an agency that writes primarily in the mental health and social justice sectors. And we started officially as an agency in 2022, but I started writing professionally in 2019 after I was medically retired from my teaching career due to a neuromuscular condition. And so lost the career I was used to and had to pivot. And with entrepreneurship, if you find a skill that you're good at that other people don't like to do, it's a pretty good in, right? So went with writing. And the nonprofit Journey to Success that just launched in December of 2024 is taking my experience and my network and leveraging it to help other people pivot in a similar way.
Interesting. We'll dive right into it. Ghostwriting is a unique and you describe it as a hidden art. And what drew you to this field? What do you love most about helping others tell their stories?
What drew me to writing generally is just that I've always considered myself a writer. I ran my high school newspaper, wrote all through college. And so writing was a natural sort of transition from my teaching career. But ghostwriting specifically, I got into when I started working with entrepreneurs. And at the time, the people I was working with were people who were very busy, like all entrepreneurs were. And they had things to say, a story to tell, words that needed to get out into the world, but they either didn't have the time or the expertise to make that happen. And then in my own journey as an author, I got to a point with my fiction work where I said, I don't know how any of this works, how this publishing industry stuff works, and how do I find an editor and all of that. And helping people navigate that process became a goal for me. And I connected with Nick Pavlidis, who's the owner of Authority Ghostwriting, the CEO of Podfest. He's my mentor. And I said, hey, if I pay you, will you teach me how to do the things? And he said, yes. So I'm very fortunate to have an excellent mentor and coach to guide me through that. And the biggest thing for me is ghostwriting is acting and writing at the same time, right? So I am taking on the identity of my clients. We do a lot of work diving into their voice, the content they already have out there. We do interviews for every chapter we write, every website we create, every blog article we write, and we're really writing as them as opposed to writing as ourselves.
Interesting. Yeah, and I love that. And you touched upon the reasons why people ghostwrite. For the audience out there, if they're because we have a lot of audience, they want to become authors or first-time authors or thought leaders or influencers.
Yeah.
For people that are writing their first book, should they go with a ghostwriter or write it themselves? What are your thoughts?
The very unhelpful answer is it depends. Actually, one of the things I would say is I would direct them to a recent study done by Josh Burnoff, who is a ghostwriter who charges a lot more than I do and does a lot fewer books these days. But he did a study, it's called the Business Book ROI study. So if you Google that, you can find it. And you'll get on his email list, which is a great email list to be on anyway, because he has some great ideas about authorship. But in that study, one of the things he found is that people who hired and worked with a ghostwriter had a bigger ROI than people who did not. And the question is, why is that? And it's really about the strategy work that goes into your book when you're working with a ghostwriter that you don't necessarily have if you're not working with someone. And so that strategy work can come from a really well-qualified book coach. It can come from a ghostwriter. It can come from, we do a lot of co-writing where an author comes to us with a first draft and they say, I wrote this and now I hate it. Please help. And I don't want to look at it anymore. So the strategy that goes into building the book is also the strategy that we use to find the right publisher, to position it in the marketplace, and to get it into readers' hands. And that strategy is what brings the ROI, because people who are having their books ghostwritten are typically not people who are making most of their money from book sales.
Mm.
We are people who are entrepreneurs. We have other legs of our business, whether it's speaking fees or consulting fees or coaching programs. We have other things that we're doing, and the book can lead into our ecosystem and work to capture those people.
Interesting. And so you mentioned traditional publisher, and a lot of guests on the podcast these days, and a lot of people I encounter there. I haven't met someone who's done publishing via the traditional route. Now everybody's going just self-publishing. They find it easier, and they can market themselves much easier and faster and more efficient on social media or email lists or newsletters. So how does ghostwriting work in the traditional publishing sense versus someone that wants to go the independent route?
So I've worked with authors that do self-publishing, hybrid publishing, and traditional publishing. And I have relationships with all three types of publishers. Makes me uniquely positioned to answer, I think. And again, the very unhelpful short answer is it depends on who you are as to which option is the right one for you. I have a book coming out that's a partner to our nonprofit. It's coming out late fall or early winter, and it's being published with Morgan James. Now, I like Morgan James because they are a traditional independent publisher, which means they act as a traditional publishing house where you don't pay them a fee for their service, but they also have the broad distribution that a traditional publisher has. So the book can easily land in a Barnes and Noble, for example. And that was attractive to me for this particular book. And so if bookstore distribution is important to you, a traditional or a hybrid publisher is really the best route for that. The hybrid publisher I work with most often is Publish Your Purpose. Jen Grace is the owner, and they do a fantastic job for authors.
Hmm.
That's a fee for service publisher. And the thing about hybrid is you retain all the rights and royalties for the book, right? Just like self-publishing, which for the entrepreneurial minded author can be really important. Now, the book that I'm publishing with Morgan James, the proceeds go to the nonprofit, and I want as much help getting the book out there as possible because it's tied to the nonprofit. And because it's not tied to my business, it's not as important for me to retain all the royalties. And the other way that I caution authors when they're looking into the different routes is with traditional publishing, you often give up a lot of creative control. Now, that's not the case with a boutique publisher like Morgan James, but it can be true for larger publishers. And I like entrepreneurial authors to be careful about that because it's your ideas, right? It's your framework, it's your trade secrets, and maintaining that creative control can be really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the idea of for the entrepreneur control and especially your content. The best advice someone ever gave me was control your content. And so, which leads me into my next question is given this control of content, for example, I meet a lot of podcast guests, they guest on like thousands of shows. And then one of they do get exposure. It's not as much work, but they don't own or retain the rights to that content as opposed to the brand that's pushing that content out. As a ghostwriter, so one of the best pieces of advice is as opposed to being once you get your footing as a podcast guest, people transitioning into becoming a podcast host or creating their own podcast so that they can control. And so as a ghostwriter, you're helping people write all these books, but what if people that crave the limelight or spotlight and a lot of your work is anonymous? How do you feel about that?
So I feel fine about it is the real answer. And what I would say is if someone is looking to go into ghostwriting, make sure you're charging enough that you feel okay about not getting credit for the work. But
Yeah.
the other piece of it is that the words that I'm publishing for my clients, they're not my ideas and they're not mine. In the same sense that the book I'm publishing with Morgan James is, right? It didn't come from my soul. It didn't come from my work, my experience. I'm just taking someone else's ideas and experience and tying them up with a pretty bow.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and it all boils down to the how the ghostwriter, and obviously you're getting paid for it, so you want to make sure that your compensation is worth the efforts, and there's also non-tangible rewards and results as well. You mentioned about ghostwriting as a skill and about projects, and it seemed, I know, as you ever feel like there's certain projects that you just don't wanna do? It could be the client or just the project is not inspiring to you. What, or do you just basically someone hires you and then you help them write their book?
I have
Mhm.
turned down since 2002, I have turned down 5 book projects. And the reasons were different. Sometimes it was who the author was as a person out in the world, and it just I find value alignment very important. My business is Connected Ghostwriting. It's built on connection. And so if a business owner is not someone who values connection and service over
Mm,
profits, they're
mm,
not going to be a great fit for me.
yeah.
And but every time that I've turned down a project, it's because there's a lack of alignment either in values or goals between the author and I. And in that case, I typically will refer them to someone else in my network who might be a better fit because I'm part of a ghostwriter mastermind group. So I have other people in my network I can refer out to.
And a follow-up question I have for you is because a lot of entrepreneurs these days, especially when you're getting started out, you basically you take on projects and work because it pays the bills, it feeds the family, puts a roof over your head, and then after a certain while, it's like you work on the projects that you resonate with. And so for the early people that are interested in becoming ghostwriters, they want to use this skill. Is that the recommended route, or is it just basically saying no, being very specific and saying the power of no?
I would say when you're wavering on a project, it's important to ask yourself if a better aligned project comes up and you have to say no to it because you're already engaged in this one. How's that
Mhm.
going to feel to you? Because there is always going to be another project on the horizon. Now, if it's the difference between putting food on the table and not, then probably take the project. My first ghost written article, I'm not going to say who hired me for it because that would make them look really bad. But it was 1,000-word article and they paid me $35. And I accepted that at the time because I didn't know any better. Right. I have since purchased the book, The Writer's Market, and done plenty of market research to figure out what should I be charging. But at the time, I was just saying, "Hey, I wonder if I could make money writing. Let's try that out." And so I guess it really depends on what point you're at. But once you learn that $35 to write an article for someone who doesn't align with your values, once you get to a certain point, you realize that not all money is good money.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's quite interesting, and plus they again, there we can go into this idea of creative control. So, next question I have for you is, what's the number one element? Is because you have to capture someone else's voice very authentically while weaving in your own creativity and expertise. And so, what is your process of capturing that essence? Is it feel or just? I'm curious what your process is.
So the first thing I do is obsessively consume any content the client has already put out. And that could be YouTube videos, it could be keynote speeches. In the event that they don't have anything, we're having a lot of conversations together. And I record those conversations and then I record it, AI transcription. We're all doing that these days. And one of the things that my team is very good at is we've developed a system for capturing what we call client voice. And so we have a style guide, but our style guide is a lot more detailed than something you're going to find even just for a web designer. We are looking for those specific phrases that people say all the time. I have a client who says holy moly alligators all the time. That has to go in her books. It absolutely has to. I have a client that I'm working with right now who is British. And so in the book, we're talking about chips. I have to say crisps because they're not chips to him. So it's those little nuances of language. And we capture them, we record them. We're very good at picking up what are the things that people say on repeat and making sure that those end up in the book. And then The biggest piece for my business clients or my self-development clients is each person has a framework that they work with. If you're a business coach, if you're a therapist, you have a framework you work with, even if you don't know it.
Yeah.
And so the biggest piece that we tackle early on in the process is figuring out what is your framework if you don't already have it. Like some people come to me and say, I have the CARE framework and CARE, and it stands for this. And that's great. But a lot of people, most people come to me and they're like, what? I don't know if I have a framework. I'm like, trust me, you have one. And through conversation, we're able to figure out what that is. And if we frame everything that we write using their proprietary framework, then the process is a lot more seamless.
Yeah. In this day and age, because ghostwriting, it's all about language and words. And with AI, with these, especially the large language models, how are you viewing AI? How are you using AI? How are you positioning yourself with AI coming into many industries and fields and changing the way people work and create, etc.?
Yeah. So I love this question because I sit at this intersection between business owners and writers, right? And so I have friends in both fields. And a lot of my writer editor friends are terrified of AI or they hate it or all they want to talk about is how terrible it is. And all of my business owner friends are AI is great and I love it and this is what we're doing with it. And I sit in this intersection. So I get it from both sides. And to be very blunt, if you don't embrace AI in some way, you are going to get left behind. And that's true no matter what industry you work in right now, because
Mhm.
you have competitors who are learning to use AI, who are using it, who are teaching their teams to use it. And if you don't also do that, they're going to work faster than you are. It's just that's how it's going to happen. That said, AI produced content is not copyrightable.
Interesting.
And my clients are typically people who want to be thought leaders. They want to trademark their framework. They want to own the intellectual property rights to the things that they create. And so having an actual writer write the words in the book matters. Now, once that's done, one of the things that my agency does is we teach our clients how to use the content we've created with them in an AI format so that they can pull social media, blog ideas, outlines for articles for other publications. And if you have all of that originally generated content, it's much easier to train AI to do other business things for you.
Mm, interesting.
And so that becomes a big time savings for them.
Yeah. Yeah, AI essentially has replaced a lot of editors that I used to use years ago, and they were so expensive, and it was just very inefficient and wasteful. And
Mhm.
now AI's streamlined a lot of things. Tying it all around, because you had a transition, and people have transitions as well. And what's the biggest lesson you've learned from balancing a demanding career with a transition? What's the number one lesson? And also, what keeps you motivated and keeps you positive when these challenges come upon you?
Yeah. So I just finished writing the first draft of my book and it's nominally titled Part-Time Entrepreneur, although I'm messing with the title right now and I think the power of the pivot is going to be where we land. Because when I finished writing the book, I went back and I wrote chapter 1 because I said before we can even dive into creating a business when we're disabled, we first have to do the work before the work. And I think that's if you're heading into whether it's a career transition or this is what life does, right? It throws a sack of potatoes at us and we either have to catch it or dodge it or do something with it, right? And so if you're in that situation, the first thing you have to do is you have to acknowledge that the situation you're in, it sucks. And you have to let yourself deal with that.
Mm, interesting.
And then you have to make a decision of whether you're just going to hold that sack of potatoes and let it weigh you down for the rest of forever, or if you're going to find out a way to use it
Mm,
in order to
interesting.
do something different. So it's that you have to give yourself a chance to deal with the feelings of, man, this sucks. This isn't fair. And you're
Mhm.
probably right. It probably does suck and it's probably not fair.
Yeah,
But you have to make a decision about what you're going to do next because
interesting.
nobody's going to save you.
Yeah. I was talking with another individual, and he was in the publishing, and he was changing in it, and he was saying you have to reinvent yourself and find ways to make yourself remain relevant. And now we face so many challenges, so much uncertainty, and like you said, nobody's going to come and save you. Obviously, not the government, or no job, or things like that. But interesting. So, how can people, if people actually wanted to contact you, connect with you, learn more about ghostwriting, hire a ghostwriter, how could they do that?
Our website is connectedghostwriting.com, so you can find information about us and our services there. And we're also on social media under my name, Maria Chapman, as well as Connected Ghostwriting, and the nonprofits around as well. So journeytosuccess.org and Journey to Success Project on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.
Excellent. Again, I enjoyed talking with you. Great work. And thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris.